Hello, I'm John Grum, and welcome to our 241st Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our televised discussions twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political dialogue. Before we get on with our program, I'd like to acknowledge Ron Chamberlain. As some of you may know, Ron passed away about 2 weeks ago, and that he was one of the original panelists on the Right and Left Discussion Forum. And he made important contributions from the left side of the political spectrum, and always doing so in a civilized manner. Ron and I have been friends for a long time, and he will be sorely missed. Today, today is Panel's Choice Day, which means that each panelist is going to pick a topic that they want the others to discuss. And our first panelist is Tom Finley, retired VP of Human Resources Development at Rubbermaid Incorporated. Next is Jerry Ritzman. Jerry was also an original member of the panel for Right and Left. And I'm glad to have him back. At least maybe it's only for one time, but I'm glad that he's here.
Thank you, John.
So today's discussion begins with Tom Finley, followed by Jerry and Patty. So Tom, fire away.
Yeah, I was just thinking back, Jerry, you were our boss, and I say our boss because I'm going to introduce Mary Halloran, who's going to read what I would ordinarily read, except I can't see well enough today.
Okay.
Way back when we were partners, Mary and I. So this is Mary Halloran, and she's going to read the topic that I have chosen today, which is, Mary, go ahead.
Immigration. And this was taken from Bloomberg. It can be found online too. Businesses across the U.S. have been making the same appeal for years. Let's admit more immigrants to ease a severe labor shortage and fill the jobs that Americans don't want to do. So as immigrants poured over the southern border during pandemic-era upheaval, the influx might have seemed like a potential solution to a problem that by the end of this decade could lead to $1.75 trillion in unrealized economic output. All of a sudden, big cities were filled with large numbers of people eager to work and start on building their own version of the American dream. That's not how it played out. The newcomers who qualify for work permits have often struggled to secure them because the government bureaucracy has been overwhelmed. Business groups say the process is broken and are ramping up calls for changes to bring in more workers through legal channels. These pleas aren't being heeded by politicians in Washington, who are more concerned about how the jump in unauthorized arrivals has inflamed anti-immigrant sentiment among voters. The poisoned atmosphere ahead of November's elections has already derailed one compromise bill aimed at getting a handle on the chaotic situation at the U.S.-Mexico border, and also has stymied any chance of legislation to bolster legal immigration to alleviate the worker shortage. There's no visible path right now to a bipartisan grand bargain on immigration, and that leaves businesses in a jam. I can't have a conversation with any business owner that doesn't revolve around the fact that they simply cannot find the skilled workforce they need, says Jay Timmons, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Manufacturers. Some 9 million positions are open across the country, equal to 1.4 vacancies for every unemployed worker. The worst affected industries are trying to figure out the best way to make themselves heard. A trade group for companies in the construction industry is buying digital ads to push for immigration reform. An association that represents makers of heavy equipment is flying members to Washington from such places as North Dakota to beg lawmakers to help. A small business group is receiving record funding to lobby on immigration. Representatives of nursing homes are telling lawmakers that without more immigrants to make meals and empty bedpans, their industry is headed for an all-out crisis. The Critical Labor Coalition, which includes Chipotle Mexican Grill Incorporated and Yum Brands Incorporated, advises its members to avoid the word immigration and talk about workforce solutions instead. To be clear, industry groups are careful to distinguish between legal and illegal immigrants and most attuned to the politics, say investing in skills and training for those already in the U.S. labor force should be part of the solution. Besides calling for a revamp of the antiquated quota system for awarding the employment-based visas, they want measures to regulate undocumented workers. While the U.S. approved a record number of work authorizations in the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, business owners say they need far more. Companies registered some 780,000 white-collar employees for the H-1B visa lottery last year, but only 1/4 of them were issued a work visa, the lowest ratio in at least 4 years. The U.S. government announced in mid-October that its cap of 33,000 H-2B visas for the first half of the 2024 fiscal year had been reached in less than 2 weeks. Sectors such as manufacturing and hospitality rely heavily on the temporary visas. Daniel Fisher, who heads government affairs at Associated Equipment Distributors, says his trade association is trying to raise awareness of the labor shortage by bringing members to Washington to lobby for more legal immigration. There's not a member of Congress who hasn't seen help wanted signs outside restaurants and other businesses, Fisher says, and we're just trying to make it known that, hey, we have this need also. It isn't that lawmakers have completely stopped trying to help. Since last year, they've introduced more than 360 bills related to immigration, according to the website govtrack.us. The long list includes a bipartisan proposal to extend the number of temporary work authorizations and multiple bills aimed at shortening visa backlogs, not to mention the hard-fought border security bill that died in the Senate last month. It's really a shame that politics gets in the way of something that everybody agrees is a problem, says Edwin E.G., Vice President for Government Relations and Workforce Development at the National Retail Federation. The effects of immigration on the earnings of American workers are a contentious issue. Some economists argue that an influx threatens to undercut wages and worsen working conditions in some industries. The Congressional Budget Office cautioned in a February 7th report that more migrants mean more wages will rise more slowly, in part reflecting the increase of the number of lower skilled workers. Still, the CBO analysis found that immigration would add about $7 trillion to the economy over the coming decade by expanding the labor force and adding demand. That in turn would boost federal government tax revenue by $1 trillion. The U.S. has never relied more on immigration for economic growth. The 49.5 million living in the country, legal and undocumented, make up 15% of the population, a record data going back almost 2 centuries. An analysis of the analysts of the conservative think tank Center for Immigration Studies found. Foreign-born workers made up a record 18.6% of the civilian workforce in 2023. That's not a one-year blip, but rather a product of U.S. demographic trends that will play out for years to come. With baby boomers retiring in large numbers and birth rates falling, U.S. employers will be ever more reliant on immigrants. The Associated General Contractors of America is planning its first targeted ads on immigration in this year's congressional campaigns, according to Brian Turmoil, Vice President for Public Affairs and Strategic Initiatives. We have this policy schizophrenia in the U.S. right now, he says. We don't want our own children to work in construction, but we don't want to let others come into the country to do it either. Yet we want to build a lot of things. Almost stopped. The American Business Immigration Coalition, which includes more than 1,400 companies, says donations from small businesses were up 20% in 2023, and the pace is expected to pick up in this election year. Misty Challey, Executive Director of the Critical Labor Coalition, says the discussion on immigration has become deeply polarizing. Even using the word immigration on the Hill is something that do not want to do because it's so political right now. I have been doing this for 25 years now, and I have never seen it this partisan, she adds.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Mary.
Pardon?
I say thank you for that.
Thank Tom.
Uh,
You get the little undone.
that article seems to say it all. And what it did when I read it was open my eyes to what a tremendous thing we face in terms of our government, our country, in this business of immigration, how important it is.
We need it.
And yet we're having trouble, like Texas and the border, and even managing it in any way, shape, or form. And clearly, if this article is correct, and I assume it is with the reputation this company has,
Well, I
It's
got a question for Jerry. Jerry, as a former employer, do you think that undocumented workers would find a place in the retail business?
I think it would depend a lot on their communication skills and how they're socialized with the area that they're working in. Depends a lot on that.
Well, I guess that's what I was thinking about is the communication skills.
Right. Mhm.
So, Patty, do you have anything to say about this topic?
That was very interesting. I agree a great deal with that. That was, it mentioned the bill that was put forward, the bipartisan bill that was put forward for immigration to fight it. And it addressed a lot of those issues, not just looking to stop illegal immigration, but also to make becoming a citizen or coming into the country to be done legally and in a faster and more efficient way, and to be able to vet those that are coming into the country in a better way. We had DACA in the past that was put out there to try to give some stability to the dreamers that were in this country so that they could maintain those jobs. There are many industries that are reliant, as it's said, upon immigrants to do the labor that is needed. And, perhaps, and I like the idea of not calling it immigration, but I think, what did they say in employment?
Let's see.
They said not to call it immigration, but call it a
Workforce solutions.
workforce
workforce
solutions.
Yeah.
Is perhaps a way to go, because other proposals that are out there, just building a wall or just pouring money in isn't going to do it. It needs to be a more than one pronged approach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noted out of this, clearly, Congress is responsible for this whole business of immigration and the laws and getting more people into this country.
Jerry, what kind of a topic did you pick for today?
Well, I picked the topic of what I saw or observed some of the priorities of city governments and also state governments over starting last year in September. And my questioning about some of the priorities that these large municipalities have. We spent a couple nights in Minneapolis, St. Paul last year in early September, and we're on a tour of the city. And I was really surprised at the number of huge sports venues there in the Twin Cities area. There's US Bank Stadium, which was built in 2016, the home of the Vikings, seats 66,000 fans, built for a cost of $1.06 billion, $348 million from the state and $150 million from the city of Minneapolis. Then there's Target Center, where the NBA Timberwolves play, built in 1980, seats 18,000. In 1990, it was built in 1990, excuse me, for $104 million. That's a few years ago. It was upgraded in 2015 for $140 million, with the city providing $74 million. Target Field, where the Twins play, was built in 2010 for $435 million. 175 came from the ball club. 260 million came from the county with a 0.15% sales tax. Allianz Field is a soccer field for the Minnesota United Football Club, and it was built, believe it or not, with 200 million of private financing. Let's go to Cleveland. Progressive Field. It's 175 million when it was first built, 84 million from the sin tax. And in 2013 to 2023 to 25, they're going to revitalize this thing with the $200 million tax receipts. Brown Stadium, built in 1999 for $283 million from taxes, in a 2013 upgrade with $120 million, with $30 million from the city. I look at, and then when we were in Minneapolis, so I walk outside of the hotel and there's homeless people out there. And I'm thinking, where are the priorities here? You're spending these millions and billions on sports venues that in football might be used 10 times a year, in some of the others more times a year, but you've got homeless people there. In Cleveland, in 2022, there were over 1,400 documented homeless. In Ohio, in February of 2024, it's estimated that there are 11,000 plus homeless people. Maybe 80% of them are sheltered. In Ohio, the homeless rate is 10 persons per 10,000. In Cuyahoga County, there are 390 families with children and 1,228 individuals that are estimated to be without housing. In Ohio, in July of 23, the population estimate was about 11.8 million. And so with Ohio's homeless rate of 10 per 10,000, that's about 11,000, almost 12,000 homeless people in the state of Ohio. Minneapolis-St. Paul has about 3,300 homeless people. In Minnesota itself, there are about 7,500 homeless people in the state. Now, the Browns are working on the city of Cleveland to help them upgrade their stadium or build a new stadium. It's not known how much is going to be asked from the city or the county to help upgrade Brown Stadium, but if we take a figure of 300 million is what they probably, some folks estimate that they'll be asking the city of Cleveland and Cuyahoga County to provide them, the Browns, with upgrading their stadium. And we have all these homeless folks out there, either on the street or in shelters, and we're prioritizing our money to go to professional sports venues. And to me, that doesn't seem quite right.
Okay, I want to circle back to that topic after we've heard from Patty, but I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but
Yeah,
Patty,
I understand.
fire away.
Okay, what I wanted to discuss was the effect of right-wing extremism as it presently stands. You know, the leader, obviously, of the movement is Trump, who, you know, for everything that he's done, he continues to push ideas that are lies or conspiracies, and feels that if he says them enough times, people will believe them, and it's obviously working. This is a man that is been held liable in court for fraud, a man that has been held liable in court for sexual abuse. He has indictments against him, and yet he becomes more popular every day. And the concern that I have is that this is infiltrating the entire Republican Party. And I've seen it shift more and more to the right. Things that concern me, case in point, in Tuesday's Super Tuesday election in the state of North Carolina, the present lieutenant governor, how he ever got that position, I don't know, was chosen to be the Republican nominee for governor of North Carolina. He has been endorsed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has referred to him as Martin Luther King on steroids. However, if you examine this gentleman, you will find out that he is an anti-Semite. He is a Holocaust denier. He claims that the 9/11 attacks were an inside job. He attacked the surviving students of Parkland High School, saying that they were whining and that they were spoiled expletive and that they should just go back to school and get back to work. And this is what the Republican Party and Donald Trump feels would be a good governor candidate in the state of North Carolina. And I don't think that Martin Luther King would consider the comparison to be favorable. We also look at, the state of Florida and things that can affect us as far as our health is concerned. During COVID, there were a number of doctors, and I remember seeing them pose on the steps of the Capitol, stating that they did not agree with the COVID vaccines and didn't feel it should be given. Okay. There was one doctor, Dr. Lodipo, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. It's Lodopa, stated that he was an expert on this, that he had worked in California at a hospital on COVID. Come to find out that he never worked, he worked at that hospital, but never had any coordination with COVID. But Ron DeSantis felt that he would make a good Surgeon General for the state of Florida, this person that really tied into the Trumpian ideas and giving rights. So what do we have now? Well, we have a gentleman that not only is saying that COVID shots are bad, but he's saying that all vaccines, while they may not be bad, should be optional. Case in point, present cases of measles that are arising in the state of Florida. Now, all of us are old enough to have had the measles, I'm sure. I know I grew up in a family of 5, and we had measles way more than one time. But it is an extremely dangerous disease, which for many years now there has been a vaccine for, and it was thought to be eradicated. But because of all of this concern about vaccines, people aren't getting the vaccines, and now it's coming back again. And it's one of the most transmissible and a deadly disease. Well, what was this Surgeon General's reaction to it? Well, he said, if you get the measles, you should probably stay home. But he said he was not going to take it away from the rights of parents to send their child to school with this transmissible disease. And of course, he thought, well, the measles vaccine is probably okay, but no one should be mandated to have to take the measles vaccine, as it has been the case for 50 years here in the state of Ohio. What we're seeing is this right-wing conspiracy Fruit Loop, as far as I'm concerned, ideas that are coming down and are placing our health at risk. And I know I'm not usually this staunch, but I've been very, very upset about this because there are so many other cases of this where we consider it normal that President Trump, former President Trump, should have Viktor Orban visiting him at Mar-a-Lago in the next week. A right-wing dictator who he likes because he's strong. And that's not the Republican Party that I know. I'm also seeing it in local elections. We have a candidate, the Republicans have a candidate for the state house, and she's excellent. She has been in that position for, I think, 2 terms now. I know her. She is a Republican. A lot of our viewpoints are not the same, but she is ethical, she's honest, and she's the kind of person you want to run against you. But because she's not far right enough, she's being slandered by out-of-state money and out-of-state groups claiming she's a Democrat, because that, of course, would make her toxic, when she's definitely not. And they're replacing good sound Republicans with people that very frankly are not.
Well, the person you just mentioned was one of the original panelists on our program.
Yes, and I have the greatest respect for her. And I just hate to see that going. I've gotten at least 6 flyers in the mail attacking her.
Yeah.
And for nothing other than claiming that she's too far to the left.
Well, I think that you've probably been holding back for all these years. I've never known you to dump on Republicans as much as you just did.
You know, and it's not, I'll tell you, John, it's because I don't know that those are Republicans. Because I think that, you know, the Republican Party is admirable. We need the Republican Party. And, you know, again, I don't agree with all of their views, but it's taken this shift, excuse me, that is so far to the right. And it's permeating the party more and more. Moderates don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Jerry, I wanted to circle back to what you were discussing, but I forgot what I wanted to circle back to.
That's okay.
For some reason, it occurred to me that drug addiction was, you were talking about the homeless people. And
Right.
I think that probably one of the primary reasons for a person to become homeless was either drug, alcohol, or both addictions. And the thing that's always bothered me, we don't do enough to discourage young people from beginning those habits. We had the Just Say No movement under Ronald Reagan, or particularly his wife Nancy. But we haven't, as far as I can tell, have not done much of anything since then.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put that on the table. Unfortunately, we've run out of time to discuss that. That was a very good spirited program, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Very good.
Thank you, John.
Thanks again.
You are watching WCTV, Wadsworth Community Television.